Greetings, and welcome back to the MCOC Encyclopedia. Today, we are covering the January update for the tier list. As a reminder, or for those that haven't seen this before, the higher up a champion is, the better they are, and the further right they are, the more often they can be that good. Champions in the top left are specialists, very good, but only in certain situations. For example, Torch is extremely good in energy or mystic matchups, but is only okay everywhere else. This tier list does not take into account niche but overpowered interactions, such as Torch versus Mephisto, Gallon versus Viv, Absorbing Man versus Terrax, and so on, because cramming a bunch of champions into 110 would make very little sense and not really help anyone. This is the second iteration of the tier list, and as such we have quite a few champions that have moved. Some have been changed simply because they were placed incorrectly originally, and some have changed because opinions have changed or things have come out to make them better or worse. A few champions have also been buffed, and of course we'll have the new champions Onslaught and Maestro from December, so we can look at where they go as well. Let's start off with Maestro then. Currently only available as a 6-star from an initial completion run of the Necropolis, and as a 7-star from 100% Necropolis. He isn't quite the Maestro that most people wanted, but let's have a look where he goes. I think the most fitting place for him at the moment is 9-5, 9 often and 5 good. He has very good immunities and pretty good utility overall. He has some buffs as you would expect from most modern cosmics, but also the protection to convert them into passives if they get removed for some reason. His damage is okay once you build your Neutronium, go to Special 2 for the Furies, then do your Special 1. The burst on that can be pretty good. But it's very clear that Maestro was designed as a defender, and he does that job very well. Passive damage, glancing, and that buff protection can make him very, very tricky. Looking at December's champion then, Onslaught, currently placed at 7-8. He has some good utility, non-contact attacks, effectively triple immunities, but also some excellent damage via his damage over time. These come in the form of his degen from the Special 2, and his Neuroshocks from his basic attacks and the Special 1. These are two excellent forms of damage over time, as currently Neuroshock has no counter, and degen has very, very few. These are boosted even further during his special attack from his new Daunted passives, which increases the damage he deals during special attacks. Note this isn't quite the same as increases special attack damage, because these Daunted also massively ramp up the damage over time effects. An excellent champion, and a great addition to the game, though he's also a very annoying defender, and you need to watch out for him. So let's have a look at some of the updates we've made to the tier list. We'll be going around the class wheel, starting with Cosmic, going to Tech, Mutant, and so on. First up, we have Corvus Glaive. He was at 9-9, but I've now moved him to 10-7. Corvus is limited by his range. You have 20 charges to work with, and you want 99% of fights to be done by the time you run out of charges. If they aren't, you've got to wait for them to come back. His damage is very solid, particularly once you start ramping him up, and he does very much like being run with the Recall Masteries. He has some pseudo-immunities as well, but his cheat death from Awakened ability is what I believe lands him in the 10 column. There are very, very few matchups you can't take a Corvus into as long as you have that range. The more you invest into him, the better he gets, but I might still see some people saying he's overrated even here. 10-7. Gladiator, unfortunately, I was hopeful for Gladiator. I wanted to see some really cool gameplay from him of people hitting into the opponent during their special attacks and gaining massive damage for basically free. I haven't seen that, and the more I think about it, I don't think I'm going to see that. So, he's gone from 3-6 to 4-4. He doesn't do enough for a modern Cosmic. His damage is pretty mediocre, and his playstyle is annoying. Heimdall has gone from 8-4 to 8-3. He's not a great champion, he's a bit clunky to play, the damage doesn't pay off brilliantly. Medusa has gone from 3-9 to 2-9. This isn't a nerf, she's still excellent versus robots, It's just there aren't enough robots in the game to warrant giving her a 3. 2. She's a specialist, she does what she does well. Nova has been moved from 7-6 to 7-5. He was just a little overplaced and doesn't keep up with the cosmics around him. Still decent, but not as good as a 6. Speaking of, Red Goblin has gone from 7-7 to 7-6, replacing Nova. He was in the same box as Venom, and I can't justify putting the two of them next to each other. He's still a very good champion, and even Sig 1 is fine, but just a little overplaced. Moving on to tech, we have Guardian, that was at 8-7, but is now at 8-6. He can't quite keep up with the other techs around him, and the damage outside of his burst isn't great. His awakened ability helps with some utility, but it's not enough to save him. Coming in to replace him from 7-7, now at 8-7, is Iron Man. I've recently taken mine up, and he is a really, really solid buff. Very high damage, access to lots of buffs and debuffs, and is just an absolute tank. When awakened against special attacks, his block proficiency versus mutants is so high, he can take basically no damage. If you can parry special attacks, you can get zeros popping up all over the place. A really, really solid buff. Nimrod has been moved from 4-9 to 3-9. Still an excellent champion, and he does what he does very well. There just aren't enough mutants or regeneration matchups to warrant putting him as a 4. Omega Sentinel has moved from 5-7 to 7-7. Great utility and immunities, with very, very solid damage over time, even more so versus mutants. Some argue that she is annoying to play, or she is stressful to play, but if we sort of take a step back and have a look at her objectively, we have a champion with heal block, tracking, cowardice, very solid damage over time, lots of buffs, armors, and an auto-block safety net. Yes, you have to throw a heavy or a light ending combo every now and again, and if the AI isn't playing ball, you will lose your ramp up, but she's a very, very solid champion. Moving all the way from 6-2 to 8-5, we have the post-buff Red Skull. He has no damage immunities, but his immunities to Nullify, Fate Seal, and Stagger are very nice. He is more of a defender now, but he has some very, very good things he can do himself. Lots of buffs, good shock damage, unstoppable, auto-block, and the ability to shut down potential stuns. Very nice. Shocker is staying where he is for now. I'm aware he has been buffed, however he would have been moved down if he hadn't been buffed. His range wasn't quite enough, and his ability to dump a bunch of his charges almost by accident really held him back for me. So 9-5 I think is where he should be now. Finally for tech, we have War Machine, moving from 9-5 to 8-6. He has very good damage. It can take a little bit of time to get there with 2 special 2s and a special 3, but it is very good once he gets going. He has Ruptures and Prowess Strip on his special 1, but I can't put him in the 9 column because he has no immunities. Yes, he has his cleanse charges, but that's not enough for a long fight, just enough to get you going at the start. Moving over to Mutant, we have Danny Moonstar. She is moving from 6-5 to 7-5. Her lack of immunities hurts, but there isn't anything really stopping her rotation, so the bump up. Possible promotion to 7-6, but I want to see more out of her before she gets that how good is she buff. Iceman is going from 5-5 all the way up to 9-5. I'm not sure why he was ever down in 5-5, that's a mistake on my behalf, but he has quadruple immunities, and only relies on the opponent being vulnerable to Cold Snap and Frostbite. That's pretty much all he needs. The damage is okay, but yes, 9 out of 10, often. Storm X is moving from 9-6 to 9-5. I said that she was similar to OG Storm, but slightly weaker and could be in the same box, but upon further reflection, I think that she is weaker enough to drop down to 9-5. If you make her a horsewoman, then she becomes extremely powerful, but that's not being considered here. X-23 is moving from 7-5 to 6-5. Her lack of immunities doesn't help, but what really hurts her here is without her bleeds, i.e. against a bleed immune opponent, she really, really suffers and her damage is really quite poor. On with the skills, Blade is moving from 2-7 to 1-8. Danger Sense is just so niche, but important enough to him that we have to consider it. Given the lack of dimensional beings, I can't put him any higher than a 1 for how often, but against those champions, he is very good. Chi Ilth is moving from 6-7 to 5-7. She's a very good bleed champion, but without those bleeds, she suffers heavily. A similar story for Gwenpool, moving from 7-4 to 6-4. A decent champion nonetheless, but really needs those bleeds to keep her debuffs going. She can do a lot without her bleeds, but you have to keep cycling and you can't maintain anything. Korg is moving from 6-4 to 6-3. He just isn't quite good enough to be moved higher. Much better with synergies, but those aren't considered here. Craven is moving from 6-5 to 5-5. Similar to Chi Ilth, a decent enough champion, but without his bleeds, suffers a lot. Night Thrasher has been moved from 8-6 to 7-4. He was overplaced, probably shouldn't have been as high as he was. Without his debuffs, you can't get his Furies, and without those, his damage is very mediocre. Up next, we have Ronan, and he's getting promoted from 7-6 to 9-6. I think a lot of people underestimate Ronan significantly, and whilst he does preferably need that high sig, he can do a surprising number of things. I myself didn't really see much in him, but I have been enlightened to the ways of Ronan, primarily by the channel AllisonEdits, which I'll link down below. There you will find a whole host of Ronan gameplay, with a surprising range of what he can accomplish. Everything from Abyss solos to EOP solos to War Boss and so on. A surprisingly effective champion that can cover a lot more ground than people give him credit for. Finally for skill, we have Squirrel Girl, moving from 7-5 to 5-5. With a lot of other skills, she's still a good champ, she's still a 5 out of 5, but without her bleeds, she suffers a lot. The only movement in science is Void, moving from 8-9 to 9-8. Still a very good champion, but just a little bit of tidy up. Kushala for Mystic is moving from 7-8 to 9-7. Nothing has particularly changed about her, I just feel like this is a better place for her to go. She can be used in a whole number of situations and only really suffers against buff immune matchups, as she has a range of different damage types. Someone being immune to one of those, or resistant in the case of her special 3 degen, would hurt her slightly, so I can't quite give her the 10 slot. Mangog is moving from 9-3 to 9-4, slightly underplaced because the damage on his big punch is pretty good, and the control from his special 2 power drain is also pretty good. His buff control with the special 1 nullifies is fine, but nothing to write home about. Man-Thing is moving from 6-4 to 6-3. He is nothing without his poisons, but even with them, isn't much. 6-3. Sorcerer Supreme is moving from 9-7 to 8-7. Her lack of immunities hurts, so we have to push her across a little bit. Wong is moving from 4-7 to 5-8. He has excellent damage and sustainability when ramped, so he's going next to Null, and the two of them can share that long-form ramp-up slot. Finally, we have Werewolf by Night, moving from 7-6 to 7-7. There is a lot more love coming out for this guy, using a sort of Valkyrie playstyle. Hit into their block, build your ruptures, and then let your howls trigger your power gain, and you can do a lot of damage with very few hits landed. There is a potential for him to be pushed further, but we'll see for now. So, that's my updated tier list for January. If you want to see more of these, you know what to do, it's all the YouTube stuff. And if you disagree with me, please leave it down below, but try and keep it civil. You can also join my Discord server where we can have a chat about it, and also there's a clips section where you can try and educate me. Thank you, and I will see you next time.